All right, everybody, welcome. Friday, the 22nd of August, 2025, and we're here for another episode of Politics by Jake. Glad you could join. Politics by Jake is the bi-weekly on Monday and Friday, 7 a.m. On KCAA radio. We do the broadcast out of Los Angeles, California. The flagship station is in Loma Linda. And if you want to view the page and see my videos, you can go to kcaaradio.com, click on the Monday or Friday schedule. That will open up all the shows that are on KCAA on Friday. I'm right next to Stephanie Miller. Stephanie's on at 6 a.m. on that station. I am on at 7. And you will see me in my bright shining face there. And you can either click and listen to the live stream, or you can download it and listen to it at your leisure, as we are in the third decade of the 21st century, and so we have all of that digital technology that's good. Okay, I want to get into this because I want to talk about what one person has called the creeping totalitarianism. Another one is fascistization, and I've talked about this on the show with regard to what happened, and as a matter of fact, I talked about it on the last show with regard to what happened in Italy. And I've explained how Mussolini did the March on Rome in 1922, and then the actual king of Italy went to him and said, we'll form a government. And fascism was very weak at that time in Italy. Interestingly, Hitler said the very same thing in an interview. He was talking to someone, probably Goebbels, his minister of propaganda, and he said, if only people had known, and I'm talking about Germany now, if only they had known how weak we were. And I've got the actual quote somewhere, but I'm paraphrasing now, and I want to make it clear to you that I am paraphrasing. But he did say this, and I do have the actual quote. He said how weak we are, and we were, and how they could have destroyed us, and they could have settled our hash, so to speak, very quickly, had they only known. And this is the way it was in Italy. And he was able to form a government, more or less, but of course, he didn't have any staying power at that time. He had a real problem because Mussolini was really in the minority. I'm not sure exactly, and I've said this before, and I'm kind of rehashing from Monday's show, how many members of the Italian Chamber of Deputies there were, but there were only 35 fascists, or fascisti, as the Italians would call them. There were 10 nationalists. So really, for all intents and purposes, the fascist voting bloc was like 45. And that might have been like 10 or 15% of the entire parliament. This is the way it was in the Reichstag with Hitler. It's the same problem that he had. And Mussolini, and I talked about this on Monday's show, you can go to youtube.com/@politicsbyjake. All the shows are there, and you can listen to the further explanation of how he did it. But basically, he did something which was really weird. It's called the Acerbo Law, and it basically says if you get the largest share of the votes, all of a sudden, you get the majority prize. If you get the largest number of the votes compared to anybody else, you get more than 25%, for example. At that moment, magic occurs and your 25% turns into 2/3 of the seats in Parliament. Holy smokes! But this is what it was, and that's how Mussolini solved that problem. And there's, more to it than that. They had the equivalent of Hitler's brown shirts, but they were called black shirts. They were called squadristi. And these were, street fighters and provocateurs. They killed his socialist opposition, Matteotti, in, I think it was May of 1924. But the point is that fascism started, and in the case of Hitler, you have the same with Hitler. Fascism started with Hitler. It didn't start in 1933 or 1934. When he became the chancellor. It started 10 years earlier in 1923 with the Munich beer house putsch, or rebellion. And he even, it's quite impressive, he actually even had some soldiery who were wearing Nazi armbands. That's one thing, that on January 6th, there was no soldiery there supporting the violent attempt to overthrow the government of the United States. Hitler actually had that in Munich. There are photos. But the point is that it didn't start right away. It began in 1923, but it took 10 years. And what we have now, and what I'm going to be talking about, kind of a historical role, and explain to you, is the creeping fascistization, and pardon me for saying the word wrong, the creeping fascism, the creeping totalitarianism that's going on in the United States. And this is of extreme concern because in the 1940s, we saved the world. The United States, the indispensable nation, the nation who did what no other nation could. Great Britain couldn't do it. They were hard-pressed. France had been conquered literally in 6 weeks. The Scandinavian countries were quickly conquered as well. And so you basically had this problem, this situation. The United States had to come literally and save the world. And it did. It did save the world. Now we have fascism in our borders. And the question I ask is, who is going to come to save the United States? And the answer is, we have to save ourselves. And this is one of the missions and premises of Politics by Jake. One is political education, and the other is to state clearly and as expressly as I can, that a fascist cabal has taken over the levers of power in the United States. And on Monday I said the 4 estates of power, and I only named 3 of them, of course, and I'm going to correct that now. The executive branch, the judicial branch, the legislative branch, and the 4th estate is the press. And the press has totally caved in. They have totally appeased, and they are falling in line. And this is part of what Project 2025 is, which is the playbook for fascistization, which they call the second revolution, and which, ominously, they say will be bloodless if the left, and they don't define who the left is, they just say the left, if the left allows it to be. So welcome to Politics by Jake, where we're talking about the bloodless revolution, but with the proviso in Project 2025 that is not stated, but which is pretty easy to infer, that if you resist us, there is going to be blood that is shed. You are going to be shot at. You are going to be wounded. You are going to be killed. And this is what is happening, and you see various things happening. Trump saying, for example, I think that Texas should have 5 additional members of the legislature. And his cronies, his minions, his mini-me's, the thoughtless acolytes to his fascistic cause have no more thought than to overturn the established rules. But once again, this is Project 2025. The established rules with regard to gerrymandering, which is once every 10 years. You can do it once every 10 years. We're 5 years into the 10 years and they want to do it. Why are they doing it? Because they love to obey their king. They love to obey their dictator. This is one of the reasons why you listen to Politics by Jake, by the way, because the 4th estate, the press, which loves to think about itself as an estate, as a branch of government, has caved in. They're appeasing right and left. Media companies are actually paying Donald Trump money when they could win lawsuits that he's bringing against them. It's shameful, and that's why that's another reason why you have Politics by Jake and the other alternative media. And I think that there's better term for that than alternative media, but for right now, we'll go with alternative media, who has to stand up, and Politics by Jake is one, has to stand up and carry the banner, because the fate of the country is entirely at stake. And at this point, let's take a break, and we'll have a couple of messages from Twain Consulting, and we will be back. And this is Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. And thank you, Twain Consulting. This is Politics by Jake, and we are back. And we're talking about creeping fascism. We're talking about creeping totalitarianism. We're talking about a slow-moving coup. And I am not the only one saying it, but I am saying it live and on the air. And how we can stop it. One of the things that these coup plotters do, these Project 2025 people do, is they try things. And then if it doesn't work, they go back and they game it. And they do a forensic analysis. They look at the things that they did right, what went right, did this go right, did this go wrong, why did it go wrong? And they do this in think tanks. And they do this at conferences. And they write papers on this. And all of this stuff is generally unknown to the public, who is so increasingly under stress economically and in a continual state of fear, because this is the old Roman saying from the empire days, oderant dum metuant, which means let them hate so long as they fear. And people are afraid. I know that you, my listeners, many of whom are maggots, are afraid. Welcome to Politics by Jake. I welcome you all, because I will explain this to you. And part of Politics by Jake, a third of our premises, is to explain how you can take action. And of course, one of the ways you can take action is by getting educated. Get educated first. So that's the third premise of Politics by Jake. And one of the things that they're trying, QAnon, that was a psychological operation that was against the United States of America. And it culminated in the January 6th violent attempt to overthrow the government of the United States. And you'll notice that some of the people went to jail, the useful idiots who had been persuaded, but they didn't go after the coup plotters. They didn't go after the fellow travelers. They didn't go after the legislators in the federal legislature or in the state legislature. They didn't go after those in the agencies, whether federal or state. It was almost, in a way, kind of a clown show, with people like Liz Cheney in the House and Mitt Romney in the Senate. He wasn't a part of the committee, but he actually voted to impeach or to confirm the impeachment in the Senate. He was literally the only person who voted for it, held up as paragons of American virtue. These two are not, and I said at the time and I'll say it now, it is a sad day in the United States when we hold up the likes of Liz Cheney and Mitt Romney as paragons and upholders of the American way, because they are some of the ones who gave us Donald Trump. So you will pardon me if I say that I hold no particular brief for either of them. But the idea is that they're gaming. They're doing all these things, and they're going to check out and see what works. And they're one of the things they're doing now is they've basically federalized Washington, D.C., and they've done it while the Congress is on vacation, so nothing can be done, nothing can be stopped. The judgeships are also being done because there is a rule, and I want to acknowledge that this is legitimate so far as it goes. It is not usual order. It is not conservatism. And it has to be called out and distinguished from that you can do an acting appointment. Alina Habba is being elevated in this particular way, which is stunning because Alina Habba is a really good example of the kakistocracy that Trump has implemented and which constitutes and which we have to look at and say is part of his war against the United States. Donald Trump, of course, with the psychic wound when he was 5 years old. His niece, Mary Trump, has talked about that at great length. Bandy Lee, on her website, she's a psychologist from Yale. She has also talked about this. Many mental health professionals have talked about the very dangerous case of Donald Trump. But somehow he's been allowed back into power. And somehow, and I could explain this, but it's not my role. I'm not going to explain this right now. I have something else. I have other fish to fry today. But somehow he's here, and one of the things that they're doing is they're going to try to federalize Washington, D.C. Well, this is a part of Project 2025, federalizing the police. And they're trying to take over Washington, D.C. And the allegation is, and you must take my word for it, and I know it's like, Jake, you're a good guy, we know that, got a radio show, you got a podcast, it's great, we love you, thank you very much. Politics by Jake, Mondays and Fridays on KCAA, 7 a.m., 106.5 on the FM dial. But how can you just expect us to believe, and I'm saying give space in your mind for the possibility that this might be true, that they are lying to you. And to use the old expression, the only time they're not lying to you is when their lips are not moving. And so what they're doing is they're trying to federalize a municipality, and the municipality is Washington, D.C. The premise is that it is overridden with crime, and the mayor has come out, and she came out late, but she came out and said, look, there isn't that kind of a situation in Washington, D.C., where the federal government needs to step in and take over and assume the powers that the municipality should be doing. But they're doing it anyway. And I'm telling you that the reason they're doing it is because it's a part of their plan. And it is a test. And if it works, they will do it in a neighborhood near you. Okay, so I think I kind of got myself caught up. I haven't even started to talk about what I wanted to talk about, but I think I'm caught up on the opening remarks that I wanted to make now, 17 or 18 minutes into the show. So, all right. You remember that starting in the pre-election of 2022, Biden referred to the regime that was out of power at that time, the MAGA forces, and the word he used was pre-fascist. He didn't say fascist, but he said pre-fascist. And later that, in 2024, both Biden and Harris referred to the MAGA forces, the MAGA cartel, the MAGA cabal, as I like to use the word cabal, as being fascist. So that, I think, was, the high point. And it was when Harris said, yes, I'm running for president, and I consider the opposition to be fascist. However, the anti-Biden coup, which is absolutely positively what it was, the betrayal of Biden, and then, of course, what do you expect? If you spend 6 months insulting and dissing and bad-mouthing your own candidate, then that obviously hurts the Democratic cause. And we've talked about this. We've talked about the coup. Basically, it was that the moneyed class, oligarchy, they wanted Biden out because Biden was going to make them, basically, without going into a long thing, make them pay their fair share, which is the American way. And once the oligarchs and the criminals on Wall Street, the financial criminals who on Wall Street heard that, they wanted no part of that. They had to get him out of there. And so used other corporate Democrats like Nancy Pelosi, who's definitely in that clique, and Barack Obama, and they basically got rid of him. But the thing that you don't know, well, I guess you didn't know that either, but the other thing that you don't know, they didn't want Harris in either. They wanted an open convention. And so they did spend 6 months insulting and dissing and bad-mouthing Harris. And she did her best, and I have my own feelings about Harris, but she was the candidate, and that out of that came, I think, a fairly predictable defeat. So Harris was defeated, and if we hadn't had all these wonderful consultants of the Democratic Party coming out telling us how awful Biden was for 6 months or more before that, the turning point seemed to be, as I said, when a group of bankers from the New York City banks, they went to Davos for the World Economic Forum, and they were interviewed there. And just so you know that the fix is in, and that they have a plan, and that these things are not spontaneous, but that they are coordinated, just about all of them at the time gave interviews to financial publications saying, we were against Trump in 2016, but now we don't care. We're perfectly happy to live with Trump. So there it was. The imperialist finance bourgeoisie was going to be very happy with Trump. And we've seen it. So what do we call the current regime? Now, there are very few, myself excluded, and a couple of the alternative media like me, there are very few who are willing to go all the way and to repeat the characterization of fascists that Harris and Biden had launched last year. What we now have is a kind of what I could call it a rotten compromise. They call it authoritarian. He's authoritarian. I think this is just inadequate, and it's misleading in many ways. And maybe another not so recent, but in the last couple of months, there were a number of people saying, well, he's autocratic. He's autocratic. Autocratic, that's even worse than totalitarian. To be an autocrat, first of all, means that you're a one-person rule, you're a one-man rule. Like typically, it was the Tsar, and this is the example I use. It was the Tsar of all the Russias, right? Nicholas II, he was the last one, I think, whoever it was. And those guys, they would go around saying, I am absolute and autocratic. And this meant I produce my own ideas. I'm self-sufficient in creating my own ideas. I am not influenced. It's not that I'm influenced by public opinion or advisors or the court or anything else like that. I am absolute and I am autocratic. And at this point, let's take another break. It's about time for a break, and we will be back talking about this, and this is Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. Now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. And this is Politics by Jake, and we are back. So we're talking about the tendency of the press, the Fourth Estate, which has capitulated to Trump and capitulated to the monetary forces that govern them, have been talking about saying, well, he's an authoritarian, or no, he's an autocrat. And at the end of the last segment, I said this is wrong. Um, I used the example of the Russians, the old Russian czars. Those guys were autocrats. Now, in this case, you obviously have a ruling group which is close to that, but it's not really all the way because there's a kind of leadership which varies in their attitudes, but above all, they're not impervious to public opinion. Quite the opposite. This Epstein matter, which has occurred, has shown, if in fact that were the only example that could be used, there are other examples, but has shown that they're not at all impervious to public opinion. They are frantic about the Epstein situation. You can make the argument, too, that Trump himself, although his rhetoric is quite extreme, quite absolutist, he has this other tendency, which is when the going gets rough or might get rough, he backs down. And this is, of course, the Financial Times definition of Trump, which is TACO, which is an acronym which stands for Trump Always Chickens Out. So the Financial Times believes that this is basically what Wall Street believes. It's a way for them to comfort themselves, saying, why, these tariffs, they're not real. They're not that bad. And, most of them will never materialize. But quite a bit of them do materialize. You certainly couldn't say that they're impervious to public opinion. Trump is practically obsessed with public opinion. Above all, when it becomes a question of this group of 25 or maybe 30% of the population, used to be called the lunatic fringe, but now this is his base. The 25% who supported Nixon even after he had left office. You have such things in this world. So it can't be autocratic. And so we dismiss that. It's not autocratic. Forget about that. Politics by Jake has made the declaration. Mondays and Fridays, 7 a.m., KCAAradio.com. And so let's look at authoritarian. This is an old-fashioned, traditional 19th century police state. It's a dictatorship. It's top-down. There's no mass movement to support the dictator, really. There's the police, of course. There's the army. One example is the Bach system, and when I say Bach, I'm not talking about Johann Sebastian, the composer, but this is the police minister, the interior minister of Austria, who's a guy called Bach. And this guy's system was he had, as it was summed up at the time, he had a standing army of soldiers. He had a sitting army of bureaucrats. He had a kneeling army of priests and a crawling army of informers and spies. That's the Bach system. And that's pretty much an authoritarian government when you've got that. The thing is that when you get around to World War I, and soon thereafter you find that the top down, if you have an army, if you send in a division of your army, they may join the rebellion. And if you only have the police, that's not enough. They may join the rebellion too. So what do? You've got to create a mass movement of dupes and people who are mentally wrecked. And Marx called them the lumpen proletariat because they were in the middle class. Proletariat is the middle class. That's what Marx described. They trade their labor for money. That's the proletariat. That's what that is. The dupes, the lumpen, lumpen is a German word, means rags. I mean, they've fallen out of the middle class for one reason. I describe it with the sweeping categorization that they're mentally wrecked. And there are such people. There are many such people. But you mobilize them like a battering ram. So you take over society. So if there's a picket line, you can break it that way. And among other things, and this is what we saw on January 6, 2021. This was the lumpen. This was the dupes. This was the useful idiots. This is the people who are credulous, which is to say that they'll believe things rather easily and will not engage in a lot of thoughtful analysis, logic, or reason. And you can use them, and they're traditionally used in this way. And the oligarchy knows it. And they've done it from time immemorial. I can take you back to about 400 BC and give you an example of this. So you can terrify your opposition this way also. So I think authoritarian is not enough. We've even got the most interesting recent one that I have heard anyway is Senator Murphy of Connecticut. And may I say that there are some people who are beginning to stand out, standing forth, but also standing out as heroes, leaders of the resistance. One is Gavin Newsom, governor of California. There's Pritzker, and there's Senator Murphy. And these three are the actual leaders of the resistance. Murphy in particular says, and I kind of opened the show with this, says that what you're dealing with is creeping totalitarianism, a creeping army of informers. But now, would it be an actual mass movement, the fascist mass movement, of which we have signs? Well, January 6th. January 6th was obviously that. So at various times he has also said the government is now totalitarian. I would applaud him for that because I think that's historically accurate and so forth. So it's good that he puts that in there. Now, a surprising number of people, a lot of news sources and so forth are willing to claim that MAGA forces are conservative, and you've heard me talk about this before too, and it needs to be brought up again. This is absolutely, positively crazy. You could, some of this other stuff like authoritarian or not, well, you could say totalitarianism is the most extreme form of authoritarianism, so therefore even in totalitarianism, there are going to be elements of authoritarianism, yeah, sure, but they're going to be outweighed by the actual totalitarian elements, and what those are, we'll get to here in just a minute. Totalitarianism is a form of state, of regime, that wants to control everything. All aspects of personal life, all aspects of social life, all aspects of civil society. And I think you can make a pretty good case that we're certainly headed in that direction. We really may already be there, but conservatives are not this. Conservatives are, once again, devoted to conserving something. That's an apt name. To keep something that has already been attained. And what is that? Allegedly, they often fall short, but the marquee ideas are this of conservatism. Tradition, precedent, especially in legal matters. This whole thing about stare decisis, which means let the decision stand, and originalism and precedent, that you stick to what John Marshall thought about things. I think we'd be a million times better off if we had John Marshall as the head of the Supreme Court these days, compared to this corrupt gang that we've got, Sam Alito, Clarence Thomas. But tradition, precedent, customs, mos maiorum, which is the old Roman term of it, the traditions of the elders, the mos maiorum, the way things were done, conventions, established ways of doing things. In other words, this is the authority of the status quo. The status quo being that which already has existed and been approved and is time-worn and time-tested. And if things are the way they are now, you've at least got to examine if you don't like that, and if you want to change that, referring to Project 2025 and the Second American Revolution, and this is absolutely positively what they say it is. Check Kevin Roberts, see what he says. Why do you not like it? Why do you want to overthrow it? And moreover, if you're going to do that, what do you propose to put there instead? Well, of course, Project 2025 talks about, but in other words, you're not going to take a leap into totalitarianism if you're not sure that it will be better. And it's problematic to say, well, in Project 2025, we talk about what it is. No. That doesn't mean it's going to be better. It probably won't be. Every evidence that we have seen so far indicates that it probably won't be. So conservatives, true conservative, of which I have said there are very few left in government. They've all been co-opted. But a true conservative would be very, very reluctant to take this plunge in totalitarianism. So that's conservatives. And at this point, let's take another break. And this is Politics by Jake, and we'll be right back.
And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Wayne Consulting.
Hi, I'm Jake with Twain Consulting. And if you're a business owner, freelancer, or entrepreneur, protecting what you've worked so hard to build starts with solid agreement. Imagine having agreements that make misunderstandings disappear and costly disputes a thing of the past. Get It in Writing is the all-in-one legal form package designed just for people like you, savvy entrepreneurs who want clear, enforceable contracts, whether you're hiring trusted contractors, leasing space, or closing deals that move your business forward. Get It in Writing provides easy-to-use, professionally drafted forms that save you time, money, and stress. Right now, you can get full access for just $99. That's 80% off the regular $497 price. A limited time opportunity you don't want to miss. Picture the peace of mind you'll have, knowing that your business is fully protected so you can confidently focus on growth and success. Don't wait until the unexpected happens. Take control. Secure your business today with Get It in Writing. Call us now at 213-465-0639 or visit facebook.com/Twain Consulting to get started. Now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, and this is Politics by Jake, and we are back. And we've been kind of defining government the way they are. We talked about conservatism most recently. We've talked about totalitarianism. We've talked about autocracy, and we've talked about authoritarianism. And this is I do shows like this every so often where I go back and I remind people of what these things are. It's really important. So let's pick this up. I don't know if I'm going to have enough time to get to all this, but we're going to try. So the last thing we were talking about was what conservatives are and what they are not. And we get people who say there are mega conservatives. And I just want to tell you, there are no mega conservatives. This is impossible. The people who support the current regime, they have left conservatism far, far behind. Which is why I said earlier in the show, it's a sad day when you take a Liz Cheney and you take a Mitt Romney and you hold them up as icons and paragons of conservatism. Just forget it. Just completely forget it. Never happened. That is not who those people are. They have been all radicalized. And because, as I say, Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney are of the ilk, not the only ones, but they are of the ilk, of the clique that gave us the maggots, that gave us Donald Trump. And it's just, they've become extremists. They've become extremists in the anti-tradition, anti-precedents, and so forth. And all of these things, tradition and precedent, custom, convention, former use, like I said, these are all what conservatives are. That's not what these people are. They're Project 2025 maggot revolutionaries who intend to overthrow the government of the United States just like they did in January of 2021. No difference. And just like Hitler, They failed, but they're continuing to try, and they will try, and they will not stop unless they are stopped. I'm sorry to declare this to you. I wish that the Fourth Estate, the press, would declare it. I wish they would say it more, but they don't. So it's left to people like me to do so. So I know you're listening to me, and I said, Jake's really going on quite a tirade here, isn't he? And like I said, I do this periodically. I haven't done this in a while, but I guess I have to start doing it again, because this growth of the idea that this is conservatism. There are no conservatism. I think if you look around the United States today, I think there are almost no conservatives at all to speak of. And again, show me somebody. Once again, I'm going to repeat what conservative, at least in my opinion, I think it's well grounded. I think there's a good basis for what I'm going to say. Show me somebody who values tradition. Show me somebody who values precedent. Show me somebody who values custom. Show me someone who values the mos maiorum of the ancient Romans, which is the ways of the elders. That's how it translates. Show me someone who values that. Show me someone who values conventional ways of doing things. The norms, that's another good way. The norms. You say, well, for a long time, we thought the norms were enough. Well, we find that they're not enough. There are people who say, to hell with the norms. That's Kevin Roberts. That's Donald Trump. That's Alina Habba. That's Steve Witkoff. That's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. That's Pam Bondi. To hell with the norms. And I just have mentioned several. I'm going to impose a dictatorship. And then you have fascism. So you go from conservatism to authoritarianism. These are sometimes mixed. From conservative to authoritarianism. And then you've got fascism beyond that, which can easily take on totalitarian characteristics. And then at the end, the most extreme form is a fascist totalitarian dictatorship. And some of my colleagues are absolutely, positively declaring that this is what Trump has done. And if I were to say their names, you would probably know them. And I don't fear to say their names. I'm just, I have things I want to talk about here. I don't want to get into that. Now, I don't think we have in the U.S. today a viable communist dictatorship. Of course, the oligarchs love to tell the credulous and the easily misled that this is all about communism, and it's not. It's about oligarchy versus the middle class, the working people, blue collar, white collar. It doesn't matter what shirt you wear. Good working people. That's who it's against. But they have deceived, as I say, easily misled individuals, credulous individuals, into believing that this is somehow communism. And that making sure that everybody has basic things like basic good housing, not the Taj Mahal, not the Trump Tower, but good, decent housing, making sure that they have good, nutritious food, making sure that they have good education, including college and including advanced degrees, making sure that they have a living wage, not this gig economy minimum wage nonsense that we have today. Making sure that they can have a pension. I talk about the movie My Dinner with Andre, and how when you go in there, I think they're in the Russian tea room. Someone check me on that, but I believe where they're eating in the movie is the Russian tea room. Wallace Shawn is in that. And when you see the wait staff, they're all old. And the thing I pointed out from time to time is, why is that? Why isn't it some young cuties? Some young, handsome guys, or some handsome women? It's because the way this was set up is that there was a union. The wait staff and the kitchen staff all belonged to a union, and their jobs were secure. They could work there. They could be protected against mistreatment by management. They could retire, and they could have a pension, and they could live. That's what a living wage is. And it's not all of it, but I've enumerated several parts of it, key parts of it. That's the New Deal. That's Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And one of the key premises of the New Deal, and this is even in the Atlantic Charter, which I didn't actually know. I found out about this. But which is a premise of the New Deal, is that a necessitous man is not, and that of course goes for woman, a necessitous person, I should say, is not a free person. And I ask you, look around. If you give space in your mind to think, well, maybe what Jake said is right, and it's not me, I'm sharing it with you. It's Franklin Delano Roosevelt who articulated this first. A necessitous person is not a free person. Look around you. If you're not free, what are you? You're a slave. You're a slave. That's what Franklin Delano Roosevelt wouldn't say, but that's the obvious inference to be drawn from that statement about a necessitous person. If you don't have a living wage, you're necessitous. If you don't have nutritious food, you're necessitous. If you don't have decent clothing, you're necessitous. If you don't have a good job with a decent wage, where you can buy a house, where you can buy a car, where you can save money, where you can go on a vacation for a couple of weeks or maybe more, and where you can have a pension, you're a slave. And the other things as well. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry to declare this to you. I said this to one of my sons. And he got married, and he started talking to his in-laws because he believed what I said. Because I used to point out the people who work at McDonald's, the people who work at these other people's. And I don't mean this pejoratively. I don't mean this as a judgment upon them, a personal judgment as to their worthiness. Because we're all equal. Like I said, blue collar, white collar, it doesn't matter what shirt you wear. These are good, hard working people. That's not the point. The point is that they are necessitous. You tell me which one of them, working there, being oppressed by their managers as they are, you tell me, point out to me which one of them. I dare you. Point out to me which one of them you can find who is not necessitous. I dare you. Show me that. And I say here, you can't. You cannot. Because they are necessitous, and that's the kind of economy that has been built. And it's been built because your leaders have lied to you. And the people who hold power over you have been captured themselves by this oligarchy, by this Wall Street, by this moneyed class. And even your leaders have been distracted because they have the same problems in their own way that you do. So this is it. In the third decade of the 21st century, slaves. Necessitous people. Roosevelt said it himself. I dare you to give space in your mind to think about this and to realize that this may be in fact the way it is. And this is Politics by Jake.
And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting.
Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. If you think owning things in your own name keeps you in control, think again. In today's world, lawsuits, taxes, and predators are everywhere. That's why the smart money hides in plain sight. We help you to build legal firewalls, LLCs, land trusts, private contracts that protect your assets while keeping you invisible. Call Twain Consulting today at 310-997-2204. Find us on Facebook at Twain Consulting. That's facebook.com/Twain Consulting. Protect what you've built before someone else takes it.
And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake.
And this is Politics by Jake, and we're back. We have a little bit of time, not much, but a little. And I wanted to talk in the time that I have left about whether we have a communist dictatorship. And I said in the United States, I don't think we have that. The oligarchs would love to allow you to think that we do, but we don't. And I'm here to tell you that we don't. But there's Beijing in mainland China. There you see a communist dictatorship. That's a communist dictatorship. And it includes the cybernetic social credit system where every aspect, and that's totalitarian, by the way. The social credit system essentially goes into everybody's life, all their choices, all their opinions, all their backgrounds, everything together. And out of that, at the other end, spits out a social credit score. And you could say, well, there are people in Silicon Valley who like that. There are people who would like to set up a system in the United States that would include all of those things. Okay, now let's get back to fascism. Now, and I guess I'll close the show with this. A lot more material, but just not going to get to it. Now, the difference, obviously, with fascism is the violence. Political terrorism it's a critical part. It's where ultra-reactionary crosses the line into fascism. That fascism differs from everything else in that you've left the terrain of laws. You have left the grounding of parliaments and things like that. And you have gone into a realm of street fighting, of stormtroopers, of squadristi, of hooligans, of violence, of beatings. They beat you up. The Germans called them stormtroopers, Sturmabteilung, which means the storm detail. The brown shirts, they had brown shirts. The German SS, they had black shirts, but same thing. Violent machine guns in Berlin, things like this. That's where you get fascism. That's the dividing line. And if they don't tell you that the thing about fascism is a violent overthrow of existing forms with plenty of political terrorism, if they don't tell you that, they've sold you short. And I would like to go further, but I don't think I can get into another part of this. There's plenty more material. I guess we'll just have to save this for another time. So this has been the August 22nd, 2025 show. And I am Jake, and this is Politics by Jake. And God willing, as I always say, we will see you on Monday, which will be the 25th of August at 7 a.m. And have a good weekend. And God bless you, and we will see you again with another episode of Politics by Jake.
And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting.
Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. If you think owning things in your own name keeps you in control, think again. In today's world, lawsuits, taxes, and predators are everywhere. That's why the smart money hides in plain sight. We help you to build legal firewalls, LLCs, land trusts, private contracts that protect your assets while keeping you invisible. Call Twain Consulting today at 310-997-2204. Find us on Facebook at Twain Consulting. That's facebook.com/Twain Consulting. Protect what you've built before someone else takes it.
And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake.
Hi, this is Jake with Politics by Jake to tell you you're not crazy. The system is rigged. Help us say it louder, won't you? Join us at patreon.com/Politics by Jake.